night, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm AuthorSlevenJay. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you can be doing anything else, but I appreciate your support. I appreciate your time. Last month, we started on our discussion for the month of June, our series on the topic of roses and thorns, where we spoke about the significance of thorns in the Bible as a means of punishment or correction for some sort of wrong. We first saw the implementation of the thorns with Adam in the Garden of Eden, when God said that the ground would produce thorns because of him, because of his disobedience, because he hearkened to the voice of his wife. And then we see it again with the people of Israel, where the nations that they were supposed to set an example for, they mixed and mingled with the nations, and God told them not to do so. And so the punishment was that the people, those nations that they desired to be so a part of, those nations would become a thorn in their side. And later, the most significant thorn we spoke about and that we can remember, I would say, would be Paul, when he spoke to the Corinthians in his second letter to them about his personal thorn. And so tonight and this month, we're going to speak about desolate places. And we spoke about the people of Israel again as they were beginning their transition out of Egypt into where God wanted to take them, their promised land that God promised their forefathers that they would inherit. And as in chapter 13 of Exodus, the people of Israel were leaving Egypt. And so God said, let's not go to the land of the Philistines. We're not going to lead them that way. Although that's easier and that's closer. He said, they're going to be led by way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea, through the Red Sea. They're going to go in that route and travel in the wilderness. And from there, their journey began. And they went from place to place in the desert. They pitched their tent here. They went here. They walked here. And God let a cloud a cloud by to guide them, and a pillar of fire by night to guide them, and also to keep them warm. And God provided water, and He provided manna, and their shoes didn't wear down. Their clothes didn't become torn down. And so every situation that they faced, they were provided for, they were protected, they were shielded. And every step of the way, they complained. They complained and they murmured against God. And they really thought they were murmuring against Moses and that when in all actuality, they were complaining against God. It was God that they were challenging every step of the way. And they said, the people of Israel often said, wouldn't it be better that we were still in Egypt? We ate food. We had food in Egypt, but they forgot that they were slaves. Sometimes when we're in our wilderness, we actually forget the condition of our situation, the reality of our situation. It seems good, but that's a relative term. It's good compared to you not being in slavery. You had food, yes, but you were a slave. It was forced servitude. You were beaten and the work was hardened. It became more increasingly difficult for you in Egypt. And so now wandering through the desert was a challenge for them, not only because they hadn't done it before, but because they were being introduced to a God that they couldn't see, hear, touch. They had to communicate to God through Moses. So Moses was their bridge. And looking at this now at face value, I can relate to the Israelites. I can understand their reaction to the situation. We're walking in this years and it seems unnecessary. The wilderness always seems unnecessary. It seems like a waste of time. However, at face value, that's always what it is. However, when us who have the Bible in its entirety, when we see their story laid out before us in the pages of Exodus, we understand the intent and the motive behind what God was doing. God was not only trying to introduce himself to them and to keep his word to their forefathers, but he was also trying to teach them about who he was and his ways, and that they would learn to not only learn more about him and about themselves, but to be the people that he called to be. And that took a lot of conditioning, a lot of teaching, a process, if you will. And the process wouldn't happen overnight, because as you can see throughout the entire time, the entire journey, they complained the entire way. At every point, they complained. And God finally had enough with that generation. And he said, this generation will not enter into this land that I promised. What they have said in my hearing, I will allow it. That's what's going to happen, because they spoke it. And with that point being made, I want to say and remind you that it's often not necessarily the external factors that inhibit us from receiving what we're meant to receive, and being at the places where we're meant to be. In our moment of desolation, when we're in the wilderness, when we're in that desolate place, it's our responses, it's our attitude, it's our perspective that keep us from entering the promised land that is ours, that's meant for us. But because we're so fixated on the past and what was and what happened and how things were, and our attitude and perspective is so negative, it inhibits us from reaching and fully embracing the good that lies ahead and waits for us, because we refuse to go through. We try to avoid, the desolate places by any means, but the desolate places are there not only to help us, but to teach us about ourselves, and more importantly, about who God is. And so I want us to learn from the Israelites and learn from their example, to embrace the places of desolation. Embrace the wilderness. Your wilderness can teach you something, and your wilderness is where you grow. And it doesn't seem that way because it's the wilderness. There are no resources, and if there are any resources, they are extremely limited. But God is not a God of limitation. God provided for them above and beyond. He provided for them in the wilderness. He's the same for you. Maybe your wilderness is not a literal desert like it was for the Israelites, but you are facing some sort of decline, or some limit in resources, or your resources have dried up altogether. Maybe it's in your finances, or maybe you're in a period of transition and you're thinking about applying for a new job or a new house or whatever it is, and you're not sure about how to go about the process. But I want to encourage you, regardless of what your wilderness looks like, I want to encourage you to trust God and to trust that you'll make it through this process. And the goal is that you learn more about yourself, and that your perspective and your attitude and your words change, because it's not those factors. It's not your bank account, your lack of funds. It's not going to be any of those external factors or your environment that keeps you from progressing. It's going to be you. The greatest obstacle Israel faced wasn't the surrounding nations. It wasn't the people that were against them. It was themselves. Their greatest enemy was themselves. And I want to encourage you tonight with that, to remind yourself that you are more, you're capable of more. There's more in you. And the wilderness can and will teach you that if you allow it. So I want to tell you again, embrace your wilderness. I know it's not easy. I know it seems unnecessary. It seems uncalled for. It seems pointless. It seems like a waste of time. And maybe if it would have happened a few years ago, you would have been better prepared for it. But the wilderness happens unexpectedly, and you can only do what you can. And in that moment, you're meant to rely and trust wholeheartedly in God. So trust God, trust the process, trust your wilderness, trust in that time. Don't focus on the destination. Focus and enjoy the journey, not enjoy the journey in the sense of being oblivious to the reality of your situation. Enjoy the journey in the sense of changing your speech, understanding or trying to make the best of it, in that you don't challenge and fight along the way, because ultimately you'll make things worse for yourself if along all through the journey you're fighting and you're struggling and you're wrestling. The point is to learn what it is you're meant to learn. Maybe change the way you speak. Maybe your perspective has to change. Lord, what are you trying to teach me during this time? What am I meant to say? What am I meant to do differently? Maybe I'm here because I've been doing the same thing the same way and I'm not getting the results I want. Or maybe you're trying to take me out of what I was in. Maybe you're trying to speak to me in a different way. What is it that I'm meant to learn? Why is this happening? There is a why. And I also want to add that we're not always meant to understand why we're going through this. Maybe, we're going through something. We may never have the answer as to why. However, there is a purpose and there is a reason. And I just pray that you endure and that you're strengthened and that you trust God, even in the midst of it. And I pray that this bless you, that you're encouraged. And I want to say to you again, embrace your wilderness, embrace the place of desolation, embrace it and go through. Look for a way through and not out. So I thank you for joining me tonight, whether you're with me now, watching this video a little bit later. Thank you so much for your support. I'm AuthorSlevenJay, and if you want to contact me or have any feedback or have a general inquiry, you're welcome to email me, AuthorSlevenJay@gmail.com, or on Facebook and Instagram via, and we'll speak again. So thank you. Have a good night.